They came to Earth as a sentence. Falling for him wasn't part of the plan asterisk the moment she scanned him. Her jaw dropped. Commander Thesa of the Creel Dominion had examined over 38 species across 5 galaxies. She had seen males with tendrils, double joints, and even a few with rotating spines. But this was ... massive. Her violet eyes widened as the bioscan hovered above the restrained human captain. Captain Mason Cole, strapped to the examination table, smirked lazily. His arms were behind his head like he was lounging at a beach, not lying half-naked. On an alien science ship. Something surprise you, Doc? He asked, voice smooth. Almost amused. Thessa's silver skin flushed with lavender streaks, her species' version of blushing. She turned the scan results over again, unable to make sense of the numbers. Your appendage is grotesquely large by galactic standards, she said, struggling to maintain her usual icy tone. It must cause damage. Mason chuckled. Low and warm, only the good kind. Her antennas twitched. She hated that it made her stomach flutter. She was a Kraliana, high-ranking xenobiological commander. Emotions were to be observed in a petri dish, not felt. But this human, he was different. Not just physically, though. That was undeniable. He radiated a confidence that wasn't aggressive, just magnetic. Most species folded under the clinical coldness of Creel interrogation. Mason? He was flirting. She stepped away from the scanner, hands clasped behind her back, trying to refocus. Your species. It is unrefined, chaotic, emotionally unstable, yet your biology defies standard logic. Endurance, strength, organ size, ... Say. It, Mason grinned. You're impressed. I am confused, Thesa said, a bit too sharply. Mason tilted his head, eyes sparkling with amusement. That's the first step to being impressed. She narrowed her eyes. In that tone here, sarcasm. It's not helping your case as a serious species. Maybe not, he said, shifting slightly on the table, but I'm not trying to be serious. I'm just being ... human. Thesa hated that word. Human. The Creel archives were filled with notes on how Earth species were primitive, emotional, wildly unpredictable. And yet, it was that same unpredictability that had kept her returning to his cell every day, claiming she needed more scans. The first time she had touched him for a physical inspection, he hadn't even flinched, just raised an eyebrow and said, "Should I buy you dinner first?" She didn't understand it, this playful confidence. Most beings feared her. Mason winked at her. Her assistant Vena had already warned her. You're spending too much time on this one, Thesa. You're not analyzing, you're curious. That's dangerous. But Thesa didn't care. Every encounter with Mason chipped away at the icy shell the Creel prided themselves on. She found herself asking questions she wasn't supposed to, laughing at his jokes, feeling things she couldn't catalog. Today was no different. Thesa stepped closer again, pretending to adjust the scan settings. In reality, she just wanted a better look. The human male anatomy was unnecessarily developed. Creel males had reproductive organs that were efficient and clean. This was her cheeks darkened again, raw power. Mason noticed her stare. See something you like? That's not scientifically accurate, she muttered. He raised an eyebrow. It's not science when you enjoy it, huh? She backed away again, annoyed that her hands were trembling slightly. She was losing control, and worse, she liked it. You will remain here for further analysis, she said stiffly. Looking forward to it, Mason said, stretching like a lazy cat. But fair warning, I bite. Thesa turned sharply, walking toward the exit before her face gave away more than it already had. Behind her, she could hear him laughing. That infuriating, masculine laugh that made something warm twist deep in her chest. She had scanned 100 hearts in her life, measured their beats, cataloged their rhythm. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to feel one. His. Alone in the corridor, she touched her own chest, confused by the strange thudding she felt there. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not to a Creel. Not to her. She looked down at the scan report again. His biology was all wrong. Aggressive, oversized, emotionally fueled. And yet, her body couldn't stop reacting. Thesa didn't know it. But this strange Earth male hadn't just broken her protocols. He'd broken into her routine, into her logic, and maybe, soon enough, into her bed. The stars had brought them together for research. But what she'd found might just change everything. Not just her career, not just her beliefs, but her heart. Asterisk Commander Thesa paced the length of the observation deck, hands folded. Tightly behind her back, antennas twitching with restrained agitation. Below her, Earth spun in slow motion, a blue-green ball teeming with life, chaos, and illogical creatures who wore clothing based on weather and chose mates based on emotion. Instead of genetic compatibility, how had one of them managed to get under her skin? Captain Mason Cole had been a prisoner aboard her ship for 12 standard days. His only crime was being part of a reconnaissance team that had wandered too close to Creel space. But the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, it was like he was the one in control. Creel females were the dominant class. It's analytical, rational, emotionless, or they were supposed to be. Yet, Thesa now found herself rereading his medical scan logs. Late at night, the biometric report on Mason had been updated again. She'd reviewed it 5 times. His cardiovascular stamina was extraordinary. Neural activity, off the charts. His testosterone levels would put a mature uric battle. Bold as shame, and of course, there was that other measurement. The one that made her shift uncomfortably in her seat whenever she reviewed the 3D model. No known Creel male had ever, grown to such a scale. Vena entered without knocking. "You haven't filed the compatibility report?" Thesa blinked. Still assessing, Vena's brows rose. "You've had him in isolation for almost 2 weeks? It's longer than we keep volatile subruses." "He's a Yun specimen," Thesa replied, trying not to sound defensive. Vena walked to the viewport, watching Earth rotate below. "You're getting attached," Thesa snorted. "That's absurd, is it?" Vena crossed her arms. "You're glowing." "Lavender, every time you return from his cell." He asked for soft fiber chairs. "And the food synthesizer is now set to Terran coffee protocols." Thesa opened her mouth, then closed it. "Damn it." Vena softened slightly. "Look, I'm not judging. I'm just warning you. He's human. They're emotional, carnal, impulsive. And you've never even had a mate bond cycle. This is dangerous." Thesa looked down, lips pressed thin. What if their way isn't wrong?" Vena's eyes widened. But Thesa waved her off. She needed to think. Later that evening, she entered Mason's holding cell again. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, shirt off, doing push-ups for no discernible reason. "You're early," he said between breaths. "Miss me?" Thesa ignored the heat creeping up her neck. "You'll be transferred tomorrow. Final compatibility tests begin in the morning." He raised an eyebrow, rolling onto his back. "Compatibility, huh? Funny. I've been thinking about that word too." She turned to the wall monitor to avoid his gaze. "This is a scientific procedure." Mason got up slowly, walking toward her. Not threatening, just ... close. "You keep calling it science, but the way you watch me, that's not just analysis." Stiffened. "I am not watching you." "Oh, you are. You look at me like I'm a puzzle you secretly don't want to solve. Because once you do, you won't have an excuse to keep coming back." That struck too close. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let me guess. Your species doesn't touch. Not like we do." Thesa said nothing. No kisses. Contact during mating. All cold, sterile exchanges. No passion, no heat. Am I right? She flinched. Mason smiled. "But there was something soft in it now. That's why you're curious. It's because when I touched your hand yesterday, you felt something." "It was a nervous spasm," she said flatly. "It was a spark," he whispered. Thessa took a shaky breath. Your culture is built on hormones, on mating for pleasure. It's unsustainable. And yet, Mason said, stepping so close that their chests nearly touched, you're still here? She looked up at him, this maddening, muscular, warm-skinned creature who smelled like cedar and chaos, and suddenly the whole universe felt too quiet. Her instincts screamed no. Her body whispered yes. Your people would exile you for what you're thinking right now, Mason said gently. She nodded, and mine. He chuckled. They'd give me a medal. She actually smiled. Just a little. Mason leaned down, close enough that she could feel his breath on her lips. You don't have to decide now, but if you ever want to find out what it's like to feel, I'll be here. He stepped back, giving her space. No pressure, no demand, just a choice. And for the first time in her life, Commander Thesa didn't want to follow protocol. She wanted to follow her desire. She left the cell without another word, but as she walked down the corridor, her mind was spinning. Her body hummed, her heart-long thought dormant beat with a dangerous rhythm. This wasn't just science anymore. It was the beginning of something far more powerful, something human. Asterisk. Thesa didn't sleep that night. Not that Creel females needed sleep, same way humans did, but rest cycles were still part of her routine. They allowed her to process data, reorganize mental files, regulate chemical balance. But tonight, her mind refused to go quiet. Mason's words played over and over again in her thoughts. If you ever want to find out what it's like to feel, I'll be here. She had felt that was the problem. When his hand brushed hers last cycle, it wasn't like the clinical contact she was trained for. It sparked. It lingered. It stayed in her. Her body responded in ways she didn't fully understand. Her skin warmed. Her core temperature rose by 2 degrees. She experienced spontaneous pupil dilation, irregular heartbeats, and most disturbingly arousal, a term she only understood in theory. For Creel, intimacy was a function, a requirement for procreation completed through nutrient transfer, brief and efficient. No touching, no closeness, no sound. Most Creel mating occurred in silence. Done. Behind sterile white walls with mood inhibitors injected beforehand. But Mason? He'd talked about things she couldn't. Process, pleasure, foreplay, closeness. He'd said it with a grin that made her legs feel unstable, and worse, she wanted to know. By the next cycle, she found herself standing outside his cell again. The same time as always, she told herself it was research. He was sitting on the floor, shirtless, essentially doing it on purpose, now tapping away on a Creel datapad he'd somehow hacked. You're late, Mason said without looking up. Thought you changed your mind. I was reviewing compatibility matrices, she said, a little too stiffly. Sure, totally science. Can I show you something? She raised an eyebrow. Another sarcastic display of male confidence. Grinned. Nope. Music. He tapped a key. A low, slow rhythm filled the room. Earth jazz. Something deep and smoky and full of emotion. Thesa froze. What is this? It's called Chet Baker. Humans use this when we don't have the words to say what we feel. Her antennas twitched. Sound was warm, alive. It felt like skin. You said you study behavior, Mason said softly. So study this. A stood up, slowly approaching. No sudden moves. No aggression. Just a human in his natural element, barefoot, confident, and, in her mind, extremely well built. You're going to get in trouble, she murmured, so come with me. Her brow creased. Where? He tapped the panel behind him. The field. Flickered off. She blinked in surprise. Vena disabled the security grid, Mason said. Said you needed to make a choice. She's not as cold as she pretends. Thessa's heart pounded. You planned this? No, he said. But I hoped. He extended a hand. It hovered in front of her. 5 fingers, warm and steady.
Ow.
No obligation. Just invitation. Thesa stared at it like it was a weapon. One choice, Remain Creel or find out what it meant to be human. She took it. He led her down the dim corridors of the ship, barefoot like her, their steps soft on the metal. It didn't talk. They didn't need to. Their fingers stayed locked. His thumb brushed hers every few steps, sending jolts up her spine. He brought her to the auxiliary chamber, the one with artificial atmosphere generators. Warm air, humid, almost Earth-like. There were no cameras here, no monitors, just soft white light and silence, except for the music, still playing from the device in his hand. Thisa looked at him, unsure, nervous. Her instincts screamed that this was wrong. But her body, every cell, said it was right. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You don't have to know anything, Mason said, stepping closer. You just have to feel. And then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, barely contact. Her lips were cold, his were hot. Like opposites touching for the first time in cosmic history. She gasped, eyes wide. That's inefficient. Not supposed to be efficient, Mason murmured. It's supposed to mean something. He kissed her again, deeper this time. And this time, she leaned in. His hands were everywhere, but never rushed one at her waist, one tracing her spine. She let her own hands explore his chest, marveling at the texture, the heat. Human skin was maddeningly soft but full of strength. Underneath, her fingertips memorized every line of him. Her breathing grew heavier. His lips found her throat, her jaw, the sensitive spot behind her antenna that made her shudder. They fell together onto the floor, tangled in one another's bodies. Sinking in rhythm neither of them planned. She didn't need words anymore. She felt there was laughter. Whispered things her name said like it was sacred. And for the first time in her life, she made sounds she didn't recognize as her own, breathy, needy, alive. Later, lying against his chest, her body still humming, Thisa looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "This changes everything." Mason ran his fingers through her silver hair and kissed the top of her head. "I know," he said. "It's not just biology anymore." She rested a hand over her belly. Her core pulsed strangely, something she'd read about in human mating literature, but never experienced bonding. Her system was sinking to his. She wasn't just aroused. She was forming attachment, hormonal alignment, a psychological imprinting. Pairing he had changed her, and she didn't want to change back. Back in the shadows of the ship, a silent figure watched from a hidden panel. Dana closed the monitor and sighed. "She's crossed the line," she whispered to herself. Then after a pause, a sly smile crept across her lips. About damn time. Asterisk, the next morning, Thisa woke up in a tangle of limbs, not her own. Mason's arm was slung across her bare waist, warm and heavy. His breathing was slow, steady. He was still asleep, faint smile on his lips like a man who had just won the war without firing a shot. And maybe he had. Thisa turned her head, was quietly studying his face. She had memorized alien skeletal structures her entire life, categorized species by symmetry, scent, vocal pitch. But nothing prepared her for the way his face made her feel. It was all wrong. Too much stubble, too little structure. His nose had a bend in it from a break he'd never fixed. His skin was sun-kissed and scarred in ways Creel would consider defective. But she couldn't look away. She felt a strange tightness in her chest, like her heart had rearranged itself overnight. Her species didn't form emotional bonds, not naturally, not biologically. And yet, here she was, curled against a Terran male, still sore in places that had never been used before. Still hearing the way he moaned her name like a promise. It had started as research. It ended as something she didn't have words for. Mason stirred beside her, eyes fluttering open. He grinned sleepily. "Morning, Doc." Thessa blinked. "You're smiling like you accomplished something significant." "I did," he said, pulling her closer. "I gave a cold-blooded alien scientist her first multiple orgasm. That's gotta be worth at least one galactic medal." She rolled her eyes, but her lips curled despite herself. "You're incorrigible. You didn't seem to mind that last night." He leaned in and kissed her shoulder. She nearly melted on the spot. No one had ever touched her like that. Not just with heat, but with care. With intention. You're dangerous, she whispered. And you're addicted, he replied. She didn't deny it. After an awkward moment of silence, her hands still. Resting on his chest, her mind a thunderstorm of confusion, Mason spoke again. So, this mean we're bonded now? Or are you going to coldly dissect my feelings after breakfast? Thisa hesitated. In Creole culture, bonding was a controlled process. Mates were chosen for compatibility, reproduction quotas, and genetic purity. Emotion was not a factor. But last night, her body had responded to Mason. In a way her people didn't even think was possible. Skin contact had triggered full nerve entanglement. Her biochemistry had synced with his hormonal output. She could still feel the echo of him inside her. No Creole male had ever caused that. She sat up slowly, drawing the sheet around herself. I don't know what this is, but it's not. Nothing. Mason smiled. Good. Because I don't do one-night stands with people I survive interstellar interrogations with. She turned to him. What if the High Command finds out? They'll come for you, he asked. She nodded. They'll come for me too. She nodded again. He stared at her for a moment, then stretched like it was no big deal. Well, I've pissed off worse. Shh. You're not worried? I'm a human, he said simply. We always survive the things we're not supposed to. His words struck her deeper than he knew. Humans were different. Resilient. Messy. Loud. But alive. They felt everything too much, too deeply, and yet that was what made them so terrifying and so irresistible. Mason got up, naked as the day he was born, and walked over to the panel controls like modesty was a myth. I should send a message to my command, he said casually. Let them know I've been ... detained for scientific reasons. Sessa's eyes trailed down his back and lower. She didn't mean to. Her species wasn't supposed to care about visual arousal. But after last night, she understood why Earth females wrote songs about this kind of anatomy. And God's help her. She was already craving more. But before she could make a sarcastic comment, the emergency alert blared. They both froze. Red. Light flashed across the walls. A computerized voice repeated the message in multiple languages. Unauthorized vessel detected. Creole signature. Class 4 warship. Shields raised. Boarding imminent. Mason's smile vanished. Thisa stood, the sheet falling from her body, exposing a full view that would have made any human man forget how to walk. Mason didn't even flinch. He was already pulling on his pants, handing her her bodysuit. They found me, she said, already activating her internal link. They're here. To reclaim me or kill me? Mason pulled his shirt over his head, eyes sharp now. Then we don't let them. She turned to him, surprised. You'd fight for me? He paused. The SSA ... I've faced plasma spiders, rogue AI colonies, and one guy who literally threw moons. But none of them ever made me feel what you did last night. He reached out, cupped her face. You're not just data anymore. You're real. I'm not letting them take that away. Her breath caught. In Creole culture, males were tools, unemotional, disposable. They didn't fight for mates. They didn't protect. They didn't care. But Mason did, because he was human. She kissed him then, hard, fierce, not out of curiosity, out of choice. And in that kiss, something shifted. It wasn't just Creole anymore. She was his, outside. The warship drew closer. Troops were already preparing for atmospheric breach. But inside that chamber, two people, one born of logic, one of fire, stood side by side, ready to defend a love that had no place in the stars, and ready to burn the galaxy down if anyone tried to take it from them. The deck trembled. Metal groaned. Light panels flickered. A low-frequency hum resonated through the entire Creole science vessel as the Class 4 warship locked its magnetic clamps onto the hull. Thisa stood at the viewport, her skin still warm from Mason's touch, now gone ice. Cold, her people had arrived, right on schedule. Efficient, merciless, unfeeling, just like they trained her to be. She turned, watching Mason strap a plasma pistol to his thigh and tighten the seal on a stolen Creel tactical vest. It didn't fit perfectly, was meant for slender, non-muscular frames, but somehow he made it look military-grade and sexy. He caught her staring and gave her a half-smile. "Last night, he said this changes everything," he said. "So let's change everything." Thesa wanted to believe that. The sound of boots thudding across the overhead walkway made her gut twist. "This isn't just about me," she said. "If they find out what happened between us, they won't just erase my identity. They'll sterilize me. They'll classify our child's hour potential hybrid as a threat to genomic stability." Mason froze. "Wait, are you saying—" "I'm not certain," she said quickly, voice tight. "But signs are statistically significant." He let out a low whistle. "You just made our one-night stand into a galactic scandal, didn't you?" She turned sharply. "It wasn't a one-night stand." He grinned. "Good answer." She didn't smile back. Not now. The Creel were efficient when it came to punishment. They wouldn't waste time asking questions. Extract her. Reprogram her. Dissect him. Possibly alive? The door hissed open. Vena entered, blaster in one hand, oxygen mask in the other. "Don't talk. Don't argue." Suda blinked. "You're helping us?" Vena rolled her eyes. "Not going to let some hairless biped ruin your career alone." "I want in on the rebellion too." Mason raised a brow. "You sure? There's no going back from this?" "I've spent my entire life watching emotion from behind a glass wall," Vena muttered. "I think it's time I stepped through it." Without another word, the trio moved quickly through maintenance shafts, past empty labs. The entire deck was already under quarantine standard Creel cleansing protocol. It meant they had less than 12 minutes before full memory purge began. Mason glanced back at Thesa as they crouched behind a vent shaft. "I've been in tight spots before," he whispered. "This isn't my first close encounter." Thesa's voice was barely audible. "But it's your first where death isn't the worst-case outcome." He nodded grimly. They emerged into the docking Basilent, sterile, a row of uniformed Creel. Warriors standing at full attention in front of the warship's open hatch. At their center stood Overseer Calrix, tall, pale eyes like a frozen moon. Her expression was carved from solid logic. "Commander Thesa," Calrix said, voice cold and musical. "You are hereby recalled for molecular reassessment. Your deviance has been flagged." Thesa stepped forward, chin high. "On what basis?" Calrix blinked slowly. "You have shared non-reproductive intimacy with an unbonded alien male. Cross-species contamination confirmed. Genetic risk, extreme." Mason stepped beside her. "Hi there," he said with a wave. "From the contamination." Gasps rippled through the Creel ranks. Calrix's gaze shifted, calculating. "You would stand beside her, knowing the cost." Mason wrapped an arm around Thesa's waist. "Lady, I am the cost." Without warning, Calrix raised her hand, detained the human. "Terminate the hybrid fetus. Reset Commander Thesa to default." Protocol. Vena didn't hesitate. She threw a stun grenade. It exploded in a flash of blue, knocking half the guards unconscious. Mason dove, pulling Thesa to the ground behind a hover freight container. Drawing his pistol and firing 2 clean shots through a charging warrior's shoulder plate, Thesa wasn't frozen anymore. She fought like she had. Trained to fight but never used. Swift, lethal, graceful, her body knew how to move. But her heart now had something to protect, and it gave her strength no Creel had ever measured. "Left flank," Vena shouted, returning fire from behind a medical transport unit. "We have 30 seconds until the airlock seals us in, and we make it count," Mason shouted, firing again. Calrix advanced, untouched by the chaos. Her soldiers fell, but she moved like ice through flame. She raised her plasma blade and lunged, and Thesa stepped between her and Mason. The clash of blade and shield echoed through the chamber. Calrix's eyes widened not from pain, but from confusion. "You would choose him," Calrix hissed. Over your people? I didn't choose him over anyone, Thesa said, voice burning. I chose me, and I chose love. She swung upward. The blade cracked Calrix's shoulder, sending her staggering. Mason grabbed Thessa's hand, and together they ran, side by side, toward the auxiliary shuttle. Vena was already inside, pressing buttons furiously. Pref-light engaged. The doors sealed just as Calrix threw her plasma, blade embedding it in the wall centimeters from Mason's head. Geez, he muttered, breathless. She's worse than my ex. Thesa sat beside him, blood smeared. Down her arm, her silver skin glowing from adrenaline and defiance. You saved me, she whispered. Mason leaned over and kissed her, quick and hungry. You saved me first. The shuttle roared to life, engines igniting. It shot away from the science ship, spiraling into Earth's upper atmosphere. Shields holding barely as they broke orbit. Behind them, the warship didn't follow. Calrix simply watched them vanish, not defeated, but curious. Because in all her calculations, all her precision, she had never accounted for one thing: human. Love. Raw, illogical, reckless, and more powerful than any weapon in the Creel arsenal. In the silence of the cockpit, Thesa placed her hand on her lower abdomen. The life forming inside her was tiny, fragile, ... but very real. We're fugitives now, she said softly. Mason looked out the viewport at the stars. Good, I've always wanted to be a dad on the run. Thesa leaned her head on his shoulder. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. Not of her people. Not of her feelings. Not of the future. Because now, she wasn't alone, and neither was their child. Not anymore. Asterisk 3 months later. Earth looked different from orbit. Mason stood on the edge of a mountaintop retreat, converted Earth-Krill hybrid facility hidden deep within the Rockies. Staring at the endless sky with a steaming mug of something halfway between coffee and Creel nutrient brew, he still called it Coffrin and insisted it tasted better with whiskey. Vena swore it tasted like industrial soap. He took a sip. Yup, definitely. But it was quiet. Peaceful. For now, inside the glass-walled structure behind him. Thesa moved slowly, a hand resting over her swollen stomach. Her skin had changed. Slightly, her natural silver now shimmered with faint golden undertones. Something never before seen in Creel females, a result of the hybrid pregnancy, according to Vena. More surprising was how her body had adapted. The Creel had never known full gestation. Their young were grown in incubation chambers. But Thesa refused to let their child be raised like a lab specimen. She wanted the full human experience, even the pain, the morning sickness, the emotional swings, the cravings. Last week, she devoured an entire jar of peanut butter with a spoon and declared it a sacred substance worthy of planetary tribute. Mason had laughed until she threw the spoon at him, now watching her as she traced her fingers along. The glass, face serene, he felt something tighten in his chest. A protective fire he didn't know he could feel, not just love purpose. He walked back inside, heartbeat steady, Thesa said, glancing at the hollow panel that displayed the baby's vitals. Still fluctuating between Creel rhythm and human tempo, Dr. Vena says it's confusing the system. Sounds like our kid already knows how to keep him guessing, Mason replied, setting the mug down and wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned into him, her hands resting on his. You still want this? She asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. More than anything. There was silence for a long moment. Her eyes misted slightly, a strange sight for a species that had no tear ducts until human DNA kicked in. I used to be so sure of everything, she said. Every number, every rule. But now, I don't know what comes next. He kissed her temple. That's how humans live every damn day. We never know what comes next. That's why we hold on tight. She turned and rested her forehead against his chest. I just want them to be safe. He held her tighter. They will be, no matter what. But safety was no longer a matter of hiding. Across the galaxy, news had spread. A Creel commander had defected. Not for politics, not for ideology, but for love. And worse, She had mated with a human to the high command. This wasn't just a scandal, it was contamination. The Creel prided themselves on biological purity. But now, one of their finest had become pregnant with an Earth male's child. A species known for its chaotic genetics, oversized reproductive systems, and irrational emotional attachments. And yet, there were whispers. Some of the younger scientists wanted to know more. Some of the soldiers had questions. Could it be that the humans, once considered uncivilized, had something the Creel had lost? Emotion, passion, the willingness to die. For another, Calrix paced the high command chamber on the Creel capital, her eyes burning. "We underestimated them," she said coldly. "We mocked their sentimentality, their mating rituals, our love. But it's more than weakness. It's power. We must eliminate them," another overseer hissed. "If their offspring survives," Calrix raised a hand. "No, not yet. Killing them would make them martyrs. Symbols." She turned toward the Dark Council. "We must study them. Learn. What makes their bond so potent? Understand the human male's genetic superiority, especially in reproductive efficiency." There was an uncomfortable silence. One overseer muttered, "Their males are biologically extreme, unpredictable, excessive in size," Calrix said flatly. The overseer fell silent. Calrix's voice lowered to a whisper. "We've suppressed our instincts for generations, separated emotion from function. But this human bonding behavior makes us stronger, and perhaps the answer to our evolution isn't purity." She stared out the great window toward Earth's distant sun. "Perhaps the future of the Kreld is half human." Back on Earth, Mason was struggling with a new piece of tech in the workshop. He had fashioned a baby crib out of salvaged titanium. Alloy, the damn thing was toddler-proof, alien-proof, and ugly as hell. Thesa walked in, arms crossed. "That's not a crib, that's a cryo-prison. I made it myself," Mason said proudly. "I'm aware." She gave him a long look, then walked up, put her arms around him and whispered, "Let's try something you're biologically good at instead." He blinked. "You're in your 3rd trimester. Humans say physical intimacy eases birth. Tension, do they not?" He laughed. "God, I love you. I know. You keep proving it." Vigorously. Later, curled up together in the warmth of Earth's night, soft classical music humming through the room, Thesa whispered the thing she had never said before. "I'm scared." Mason didn't answer right away. He just kissed her knuckles and held her hand to his heart. "Then we'll face the fear together." Because in that little cabin, hidden among the mountains, something impossible was happening. A Creel warrior had fallen in love with a reckless, overconfident, large anatomy. Human, and soon. A child would be born from their love. Not Creel, not human, but something new, something stronger, and the stars were watching. The storm came at midnight, not the weather, the Creel. A full escort wing dropped out of FTL above Earth's stratosphere, silent as death, wrapped in cold obsidian holes. Their ships shimmered with dark energy fields designed to jam human satellites and block outbound signals. No broadcasts, no warnings, no diplomacy inside the mountain compound. Mason had just finished adjusting the climate field around the nursery. The walls were reinforced with heat displacement mesh. Crib had been upgraded again, now capable of surviving a small meteor impact. Thesa stood in the corner, arms around her belly, breathing slow and steady. Contractions started 21 minutes ago, she said. Mason's head shot up. Now. She nodded, calm but pale. Our child has excellent timing. Mason rushed to her side. They couldn't wait 12 hours? Apparently they're human enough to be impatient, she muttered, sweat already forming. On her temples, Vena burst in. Out of breath, plasma rifles slung across her back. They're here, fleet size. Through clenched teeth. Vena's expression darkened. 12 cruisers. High command insignia. Calrix is leading the operation herself. Mason cursed. Guess this isn't a friendly baby shower. But Thesa's expression didn't crack. She closed her eyes, focused, calculating through pain. There. Not here to kill me, she said. Not right away. Calrix wants to extract the child. Study the hybrid. She needs it alive. Wonderful, Mason muttered. We'll just not let that happen. Outside, the earth trembled. Creel dropships descended through clouds like daggers, cutting through thunder. Power grids flickered. Communication went dark. But inside the mountain, light began to grow. It started from Thessa's skin, a gentle glow that pulsed with each contraction. Her body was entering a biological state no Creel had experienced before. True, natural emotional labor. Unmedicated, unassisted, pure instinct. She gritted her teeth as her knees buckled. Mason caught her in his arms, helping her to the modified medbed. Stay with me, she whispered. Always. Outside, automated defense grids came online. Plasma turrets rotated. Combat drones hummed to life. Vayna took position at the security console. We won't hold them long, she said grimly. But we'll hold. Mason looked over his shoulder, then down at Thessa. Her skin was radiant now, gold and silver streaks running like rivers. Over her body, sweat coated her brow. Her eyes burned like twin suns. This isn't just birth, she said, voice deep with something ancient. This is evolution. Then she screamed, not in pain but in power. A tremor shook the building. Lights dimmed. The walls pulsed with energy. Vayna turned from the console, eyes wide. The child is generating an energy field. I've never seen readings like this. Outside, the Creel landed. Calrix stepped from the lead vessel flanked by elite guards. She approached the mountain entrance, unfazed by the blizzard, unfazed by the storm. She spoke into her calm. Open the doors, or we open them for you. Inside, Thessa gripped Mason's hand as another wave crashed through her. You were right, she gasped. It was never science. It was feeling. Mason wiped her brow, voice choked with emotion. You're the strongest thing I've ever seen. No, she whispered. We are. Then the air split open. With a final scream, half rage, Thessa gave birth, and the child came into the world wrapped in light. A girl, tiny, silver-skinned with golden eyes, glowing softly, humming with both Creel energy and something distinctly human love. Mason stared, heart thundering. She's beautiful. She's ours, Thessa whispered, tears in her eyes. But outside, Calrix stepped into the mountain corridor, weapon drawn. She made it 5 steps before the child's energy field rippled out in a shockwave. The mountain shook. Creel soldiers were knocked back. Weapons shorted. Comes fizzled. And Calrix, who had never flinched in battle, stumbled to one knee. What is this? She gasped. What have you created? Vayna appeared in the doorway, rifle lowered, awe on her face. A future, she said. And it doesn't belong to the Creel. It belongs to them. Inside, Mason cradled his daughter as she opened her eyes for the first time and smiled. It wasn't a human smile. It wasn't a Creel smile. It was something new. The first smile of a species that would rewrite what it meant to love. To fight, to feel. Calrix stood, trembling. This changes everything. Thessa, her strength returning, met her old commander's gaze with fire in her voice. No, she said. We did. Calrix lowered her weapon and turned away. For the first time in Creel history, her mission was aborted. In the weeks that followed, the child, named Lyra, became legend. Earth's leaders met with hidden Creel dissidents. Treaties were whispered. Barriers began to break. Vayna became an ambassador, working both sides, bridging the gap one sarcastic comment at a time. And Mason? He built her a swing made of starship cables and hung it from a tree. Thessa watched their daughter float above the ground with tiny pulses of energy, laughing like starlight. You did this, she whispered, hand on Mason's chest. He shook his head. We did. As the sun dipped below the horizon, families stood together, the first of their kind. Not fully alien, not fully human, but more than both, and above them. The stars burned just a little brighter, because in the end it wasn't war or weapons, or purity that changed the galaxy. It was love, and a very, very lucky man from Earth, with a lot of heart. And just the right kind of anatomy. The end.